All right. I see we have some people on Zoom. Can everyone on Zoom hear?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Let's then go, Andy, if you'll do the roll call, please.
Okay. Brittany Layton,
Present.
Amanda Jeschke,
Here.
Cheyenne Hoffa,
Here.
Nathan Sturdevant,
Here.
Jason Stein.
Here.
We are missing Scott Meyer and Jason Snyder.
All right, thank you. First item on the agenda is to approve the November meeting minutes. Has the board had an opportunity to look over these, and do you have any comments or corrections, I should say? All right, do I have a motion for approval?
I'll make a motion to approve the November 29th meeting minutes.
Do I-
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Obviously no opposed, so let's say they're passed. All right, Adam, is there any additions or corrections to tonight's agenda?
No, ma'am.
All right. First case up is the Ridgeview West Site Plan and Minor Subdivision. So Adam, if you will take us through the presentation.
Sure. All right, so for the record, I'm Adam Zaklakowski, the Planning and Building Director for the town of Fortville. This case tonight is the Ridgeview West project. It's a site plan approval and a minor subdivision approval. So the applicant Hudson Investing is seeking site plan and minor subdivision approval for 2 planned apartment buildings, each with 40 units on approximately 4 acres at 600 North Main Street, which is west of the existing Ridgeview apartments. So the first case, the site plan case, is a request for approval of essentially a concept site plan, landscape plan, building elevations, and lighting plan. And then the second case is a request for approval of a 4-lot minor subdivision to split the property and to dedicate right of way per the thoroughfare plan. And it includes the existing unplatted Ridgeview Apartments parcel. So just to give everybody in the public an overview of the development process for this particular case, per the zoning ordinance and per the state law as to how the process towards construction and approvals works in this case. It's more or less a 3-part process. So the first part is the zoning portion of the project. That involved a public hearing, a plan commission recommendation, and in this case, a planned unit development, which had unique development standards for this project, and it was approved by the town council. So with that, we move into the second part of the processing, which involves the site plan approval, and in this case, a minor subdivision plat. And so tonight there would be a public hearing. And the question that the Plan Commission is asked is do these documents that they've submitted for the review here tonight conform to the PUD? And those documents need plan commission approval only. It does not go to the town council. And then from here, if it were approved, then more or less the last step in the process is the final civil construction documents and building plans. There's no public hearing for that portion of the project. Basically, as staff, we would review it to make sure that it conforms to the approved PUD and to this approved site plan if it were approved here tonight. And that's where we would have all final engineering details that would be reviewed by our town engineer. Final drainage calculations and such would be reviewed by the Hancock County surveyor. And again, it's a staff review. So I wanted to just give everybody a refresher as to kind of where this, what we're doing here tonight, where this falls in the overall process. So to refresh your memory on this case, the area with the star is where the project would be located. You can see off to the east is the existing Ridgeview apartments that I believe was built in the 90s. And on this particular property here is where this project would be located, more or less between Carolina Street and Michigan. And the buildings would flank an extended main. Here's an oblique aerial view. Certainly, if we need to refer back to any of these, we can. But again, you can see there are some mature trees that are on the property today, but it is, of course, undeveloped. And if we take a look at the zoning map, this is with the recent changes that were adopted by town council. So the zoning shifted from residential 3.5 to PUD. And that was approved by town council back on June 20th. And if we look at the surrounding zoning, you can see to the north, it's residential 3.5, to the south, residential 3.5. And then off to the east is residential -4, which was carried over from a Hancock County designation. But the R3.5 is predominantly single family residential, but it does also allow 2 units, duplexes. So this was the concept site plan that was taken right out of the PUD. This is just for reference. You can see that both of the buildings plan to be 47,300 square feet each, and they would each have 40 units. And again, they would both front onto Main Street with parking in the rear and to the sides. So more specifically, here's the site plan that they're seeking approval for tonight. Of course, it's built upon what was already approved in the PUD. It just does show a bit more engineering detail, something that's getting pretty close to what the level of detail that we would expect at final engineering. So this is kind of the next step in the process. And the typical review items on this site plan per the zoning ordinance and the thoroughfare plan requirements would be number 1, access. So access will be from Main Street, which will complete the missing gap generally between Carolina Streets and Michigan Streets. And the right of way that they're proposing is 50 feet. That would meet the local street standards of the town. They would have 28 feet curb face to curb face. The roadway is 20 feet wide near the crosswalks, which are at the north end and the south end of the site to slow down traffic along Main Street upon entry into the project, also to make it more pedestrian friendly. Also, in terms of access, they'll be providing 5-foot wide sidewalks along Main Street, which will be extended to the existing sidewalks to the north and south on both sides of the street. And of course, they would be providing proper ADA ramps and warning surfaces, crosswalks, as I mentioned. In terms of uses, the Ridgeview West PUD states that the development shall be permitted mixed use, allowing multifamily and first floor commercial uses within the project area. Commercial uses would be as permitted in commercial neighborhood zoning. district. They'd be permitted on the first floor of the buildings. However, the first floor is not required to be exclusively commercial use nor contain any commercial uses. So uh, the residential uses as permitted in residential multifamily would apply in this case. So there is no change from what they had approved as part of the PUD in terms of the intent of doing a multifamily building without any commercial. For the density, again, that's as regulated per the planned unit development document. A maximum of 20 multifamily units per acre, gross density. That would equate to 80 total units. And the minimum dwelling unit size shall be 700 square feet. And we would confirm that during the final building plan review in terms of the square footage minimum. In terms of the parking, the amount that's required per that PUD is 1.5 spaces per dwelling units, and that would turn out to be 130 spaces maximum. And they are providing 130 spaces, including the ADA spaces. And they will be providing curbing around the parking lot as required. As I mentioned, in terms of drainage, the final plan would be reviewed as part of the final civil construction plans, but they are providing a pond and storm sewers, which would ultimately outfall into a county legal drain. Here is the landscape plan. You can see that it builds upon the drawing that was shown in the PUD, shows a little bit more definition in terms of what they would be looking to plant and where exactly they would be planting that. Sure. More specifically, in terms of landscaping and screening, they are providing on-site landscaping in accordance with the PUD and the zoning ordinance. And so that includes items such as parking lot landscape islands, trees and shrubs, dumpsters enclosed and landscaped. And they do have to provide a buffer yard, which they are providing. It's type 1 buffer yard. They're providing that around the northwest and the south. In terms of lighting on the project, they will be providing decorative public street lights, which would be based on the Main Street lights that were recently installed. And they'd put those at the southwest parking lot entrance and the northeast parking lot entrance. The lighting that is shown right now, which will have to be tweaked, is showing 22 feet tall. They're downward pointing lights and they're attached to the building. The only minor issue with that is they have to be 20 feet tall for the zoning ordinance. And we do have an approval condition on that. So for the lighting plan, they were in the process of completing the revised photometrics to have those Main Street lights in there. And you can see these are the decorative street lights. This is what they would look like. They'd be fully shielded with the lighting pointing downward. And then in terms of the color temperature, it would be 4,000 Kelvin, which is a pretty reasonable intensity of light for a residential area. Not too bright, not too dim. In terms of the building elevations that they're looking for approval for tonight from the PUD, you can see what they had originally planned. It's essentially the same thing that they're showing you tonight. They're just providing a bit more detail in terms of where the different types of materials, such as hardy plank siding or modular brick, stacked stone, where that would all exactly be placed on the building. And then most importantly, they're also showing the height of the building. So at its highest point, which would be the top of the parapet on the roof, you're looking at about 44 feet. So they're in compliance with the maximum height that's allowed. So quickly, in terms of the building elevations, the PUD says that the residential buildings shall be consistent with the design shown in the ordinance. The masonry materials such as brick, stone, or limestone shall be required at the first floor of the front and side facade. which they're meeting that. Secondly, the maximum building height is 45 feet or 3 stories. And as I had mentioned, they're at 44 feet, so they meet that. And then all first floor amenity spaces facing Main Street shall have the appearance of commercial storefronts on the exterior of the building. And the front facade of all buildings shall face the Main Street right of way. So no issues there. And then just a refresher on the approved building materials, brick, limestone or a product which appears to be limestone, stone coping, fiber cement panels, hardy plank and panel siding, and vinyl is prohibited in this project. So they meet all of those standards. Lastly, it says that all mechanical units shall be screened and landscaped if on ground level. Roof mounted units shall be screened behind a parapet wall or with an architecturally compatible screen or enclosure. And I believe they will be roof mounted, and those parapets will screen it. And for that element, we'll confirm that on the final plans. So the last part of the project involves this minor subdivision plat. You can see what the document looks like. Of course, we had provided that earlier. But the entire plat includes actually 4 lots. So lot 1, I'll come back to this if we need to. But if we follow the text here, what that plat does is it achieves the following objectives. It dedicates the public right-of-way along Main Street at 50 feet, as I had mentioned. And then it legally subdivides the current property into 4 lots. And so let me go back to previous page. So lot 1 would be the existing Spinner property where the homestead is. Lot 2, of course, would be the lot on which the western apartment building would sit. Lot 3 is the eastern building. And then lot 4, where it says New Ridgeview LLC. This is simply the existing Ridgeview apartments. Since the ownership team is the same and the Ridgeview apartments had not been platted before, it was just what we call an unplatted parcel. It was just folded into this plat so that this entire area is shown on a plat. In terms of community response, no letters of remonstrance have been received on this specific site plan or minor subdivision proposal. I should note that late today, I got a draft of some concerns that a neighbor to the north had. And I don't know if the final draft was submitted by him to you all or not, but essentially he owns the home that's northwest of the property. I think it was 706 Main Street. I think he was hoping for some additional screening for that parking area, whether in the form of a fence and or some additional landscaping. So we can talk about that. Hopefully he'll be either in the audience or on the line. With that, my recommendation would be to approve the site plan, the landscape plan, the lighting plan, the building elevations, and the minor subdivisions. The following condition: that the building mount and lighting shall be no taller than 20 feet from the grade per the zoning ordinance. So with that, if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to address those. And of course, we can always bounce back and forth between different exhibits in the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. All right, so next in our process, we're going to ask the petitioner if they're available tonight to come up and add any additional. Is there any additional? Okay, let the record show. Okay, all right. Well, we might call you up here in a little bit. We also have time now in the agenda for a public response, and this could be for or against or comments or concerns. Now, please keep in mind, this is just on what is being heard tonight on the site plan, the landscape plan, the building elevations, lighting, and the 4 plats. So is there anyone that has any comments on any of these things they've heard tonight?
I'm on Zoom. I hope you can hear me. This is Bill and Sherry Lambert, and we own 706 North Main. We'd like to speak.
Okay. All right, go right
Um,
ahead.
Okay, so if you look at how the landscape plan and the parking is set out, and you look at where 706 North Main is, by the way, I can't see any drawings that you have up on your monitors or anything, although I've looked at, some things. But you can see that there are 6 parking spaces that are facing our front yard. Actually, all the way along the front of our property to the side of the house. But those 6 spaces will be 10 feet from our property line. And there's also a drainage utility easement that I believe is 15 feet on our property and 15 feet on the adjacent property. I don't know what becomes of that, but there's a swell that goes down there that probably drops about 2 to 3 feet. I wonder, if you're going to put parking there, is there also going to be a retaining wall to hold those parking spaces up? How that grading is going to be done, but it seems like I wonder if there couldn't be at least 6 feet tall of screening when those headlights come in, at night, and there's 6 spaces with headlights facing directly at our house. I mean, could there be some fence or 6 feet of landscaping or something? I can't really read what exactly this landscaping is, but it looks like pretty low-lying landscaping to me. And from where a car is going to be parked to our front yard is going to be 10 feet. It just doesn't seem like enough. So is there going to be a berm or is it, I mean, that property, the elevation drops off to a swell between our properties. So it's going to look like the cars are beaming directly into our front yard.
Okay.
So
All right.
that's my comment. And Adam, I sent that over to you today with hoping that we would be able to talk today, as I said in my email, but I don't think I heard from you. But so if this is not the point to raise this, I apologize, but I definitely want it raised.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And I definitely have made a note of this, and we'll circle back around here with the petitioner here after we've heard all of the
Could I
public
also say
responses. Thank you.
something? This is Sherry Lambert. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, we're just saying a minimum of 6 feet, something that would grow then obviously taller, and something like a pine tree or something that would screen all year long, like not something that just, has leaves in the summer and then it's bare in the winter. So I'm also asking for some kind of landscaping like that.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you. Is there anyone else on Zoom while we're concentrated on the screen at the moment that would like to say something? Okay. I know we had someone here in the room. If you'll come forward and just say your name, spell your name and your address, please.
John Smith, 802 North Main Street. My question is, the concerns that were expressed when this was all approved by the town council was traffic. And with Main Street going through, I don't see anything on here, and maybe that's not part of this, but what are we planning as far as stop signs in this area to slow traffic down coming through town? Has that been addressed yet, or is that something that's going to be down the road?
I'm going to take questions and then we'll
Okay.
get some answers here. All right. Thank you so much. Is there anyone else that has any concerns or comments?
I just have one other comment with those 6 parking spaces. It seems like you could pull them back a little bit further from our property and do parallel spaces further down the property, get all 6 of your spaces without the headlights facing our house. That might be easier for everybody, and the elevation difference would be a lot easier to deal with too.
Okay, all right, thank you. Let's see here. Lost my place. So if we have no more public comments, we have time for government officials that are here tonight that might have any comments. I'll get that in here a second. Okay, I'm going to show record shows the government officials have known. Okay. Yeah, let's go ahead and do our board here if we have any questions or comments to Adam or the petitioner, and then we'll bring the petitioner back up and have him cover all these that he's heard. All right, Jason.
So Adam, we're talking about combining these properties into one subdivision, correct? The new Ridgeview and the old Ridgeview.
One platted subdivision, correct?
Yeah. So I know that the old Ridgeview is in a different zoning than this one, but what requirements of a subdivision are going to bridge between both properties that are now going to be in the same plat?
Well, the requirements to form a subdivision are pretty basic. It would just have, each lot would have to meet the minimum square footage in the zoning district, which these exceed what's in multifamily zoning, which basically, if there's anything in the planned unit development document that doesn't speak to a certain standard in a specific way, then you just default to multifamily zoning in this case. So each lot meets that minimum standard. And again, the size of the existing lot should not be an issue because there's already an apartment complex there, obviously.
So just to make sure, none of the requirements from the PUD are going to apply to the old Ridgeview
No.
and the R4, and none of the R4 are going to
Correct.
bleed back over.
No,
Okay.
no, not, that's definitely not. The only reason for including Ridgeview apartments into the plat was just to have a legally subdivided platted lot. Because one could make the case that when that project was built a long time ago, that if anytime you want to subdivide property, it's supposed to go through some sort of process, usually a minor subdivision process. And of course, that didn't happen back then because there was no additional development at the time, and it was probably all commonly owned. So, but as properties are sold, the ordinance requires that that they're subdivided legally. So just kind of cleaning something up.
All right.
I have questions.
Okay.
So these buildings are roughly 47,000 square feet per building?
Mhm.
Or total?
Per building.
And are there 80 total units for both buildings or 80 units per building?
There are 40 units in each building.
Okay. My question is, there's 130 parking spaces and there's planned commercial on the entire first floor. So then there's 40 units, so 20 units for each floor, correct?
Well, in terms of the commercial, the developer has the option of doing commercial on the first floor. There's no requirement that they do that, and they don't plan on doing it.
So then residential will be on the first floor,
Correct.
but we said that the first floor is all going to be
Storefront.
storefront. So how does that work with there being residential?
In
it's all storefront.
terms of the appearance. So if we go back to zoom out of here.
Okay.
I think that's what I turned.
So we're going to have a commercial look with no commercial presence?
More or less, yes.
Can somebody explain
Logic?
the rationale behind that?
I think I defer to the developer for that one.
Okay, we'll put that on the list. So when we bring him back. up.
Because I can say, I'm not sure how comfortable I am with giving the appearance of additional commercial space for people to see when they're walking around town and there actually not be any commercial.
I mean, it just
Present.
seems to be a safety hazard to me. I'm not saying that crime will be an issue, but you do have people who are looking or who will commit crimes, and they are looking for storefronts and such to vandalize. And if that's not a storefront, that's a residential area. I think you're asking for problems. Also, if it is available for commercial purposes, my question just would be, where will parking be? I mean, if it is available for commercial and say the developer decides to go ahead and lease to a restaurant or something like that, we have major parking issues in this whole area of town with restaurants and things like that. Just things to think about. I wanted to know where the pond would be located. And then this is just a personal preference. I see a lot of the development in the area, and most of Fortville is more of a classic traditional architectural style, and this seems a little bit more modern. It doesn't seem to really fit with the area. Just a thought. The black and white just doesn't really seem to flow.
Okay, I've got that noted as well.
Yeah.
I guess tag on to that. If we were on the west side, space requirements.
And-
Talking parking.
Yeah, so we're talking 1.5
Okay.
spaces. Do you want me to
Yeah.
answer some of the,
The
I can answer some of the
parking
questions
seems
now.
to
Might be
be
easier.
a problem with if we have commercial versus residential with parking.
Okay, so let me do my best to try and answer some of the questions that were raised. All good questions. So if we look at the landscape plan here, the detention pond is over here, where the cursor is. Okay. In terms of the architecture or appearance of the commercial storefronts, if we take a look at what's in the approved PUD, it's really this section here. It says all first floor amenity spaces facing Main Street shall have the appearance of commercial storefronts. So I think if I remember correctly, the idea was if they had a gym or a rec center, that only that piece was required to have the appearance of a commercial storefront, not necessarily the entire stretch of the building. And then to answer the last point that was raised about commercial in general and parking is that when the PUD was developed, I think early on, there was discussions about creating and having the ability to create more of a mixed use environment with some commercial. But frankly, while that is still in the PUD, the developer has gone through a parallel process in terms of the TIF financing for the project. And there is no commercial whatsoever that's planned as part of this project. So frankly, I think the only way that could happen at this point is if either the developer radically changed the plan, which is not likely at this point, or if the project were to be sold or developed by another developer under this PUD, in which case I think that's obviously a low likelihood. It does happen from time to time, and if it does happen, usually when there's a new developer, they probably want to make changes to their some of the regulations anyway to fit changes they may want to make to the project. So in terms of commercial, it's not on the table at this point.
If it were sold, would it have to come back before the plan commission?
No, not only if it was sold. If they sold it and they wanted, the new developer wanted to develop it exactly as was planned, they would have the right to do that. But if there was a new owner, again, my experience has taught me that 9.9 out of 10 times they'd want to change something about the project. And most times that would necessitate coming back to you all for a PUD text amendment if they did that. So not to say that it couldn't happen, it does, but at this point, I think given that the financing is almost complete, and I think they're supposed to close in mid to late January. It was supposed to be earlier in December, but they pushed it out a bit, so.
To circle back around then on this facade of the buildings.
Mhm.
What I'm understanding is if they are putting amenities down there like a gym or whatever, those specific areas need to have a storefront appearance. If not, it will still have a residential apartment appearance if it's actually a resident, if it's an apartment unit.
Right.
Okay.
And I just wanted to add for consideration too, is that as you can see, because this project is a recent project and there hasn't been a lag in time or a change in ownership, as is common, what they were showing in the PUD for their concept plan is almost identical to what they're showing now, virtually identical. So if they had never provided any sort of concept plans and there was a requirement to have a true amenity space or to have an amenity space that had commercial architecture to it, I think one could realistically argue that point, especially if they didn't have a concept. But I think the fact that they're showing these building elevations that were approved as part of the PUD package and they're not veering from that it would be consistent. And I think lastly, I think the reason that language was put in initially was to not necessarily have a true storefront as we might think of it in a small town, but rather to not have a suburban apartment complex with a long strip of, whether it's vinyl or even fiber cement siding, to a way of breaking up the massing of the building. So I think the way the architects have designed it is there are different masses in the middle of the building, different elements of the facade. So you could always look at it that way as well.
Okay. All right. Does the board have any other comments?
So is there anything, I mean, this is what the building is going to look like, correct? Or is there anything that I mean, is there anything that prevents the builder from making the entire first floor look like a commercial facade? Do we have any guarantees that they're not
I
gonna
mean,
do that?
Is this what we're approving tonight? Is this elevation?
Because I will say, my vote is
Correct.
gonna depend on the answer for this question.
Well, what they're showing tonight is virtually identical to what they were showing, as part of the PUD. And if there are any deviations, let me know, but I don't believe that there were. So if there was not a, concept rendering that was put into the PUD originally, then, certainly there would be a lot of discretion to go back and forth, but, the bottom line is, if they wanted to do something different from what you see on the bottom slide, and they wanted to do something drastically different, and they had a lot of brick, or it was just a very different design, then it would have to come back before you all, because it's not compliant with that previous piece. It's not compliant with what's on top. So basically, I think in summary, the bottom line is, as we move through the process, we're not changing the course, it's just getting more and more detailed than where we were earlier. If that makes sense.
But it doesn't seem like those details are getting added into this documentation. Because we're now talking about it was originally set for mixed use, and now we've gone to amenity only. Is that being reflected anywhere in this documentation in the language? Or are we just going on what we think's happening?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the.
Well, I feel like we're going on the developer's goodwill and word that they're saying that it's going to be this way.
Well, the one thing that I can guarantee you is that what they would build would be what you see here on the bottom. And if they wanted to veer from that
Then they have to. come back.
substantially, then they would have to come to you all for approval.
What's our definition of substantially?
That would be up to me as the director to decide. And again, since nothing's being, I always err on the side of, board approval of those types of things, especially if it was approved as part of a public process, as part of the zoning package. Good example, I think, is the, Madison Lofts project. Originally, they were trying to do something, quote, as simple as just putting a pitched roof on it. And, we said, that's substantial enough of a change that it's going to look different, that the board should look at it. So it's basically a very similar test.
So the intent of this project is it's limited access. You will access the apartments from the inside of the building, correct?
Correct. I don't believe there are any walk up.
Except for maybe, a first floor courtyard landing space. So the first floor, if you don't have a front door accessing the main
Right.
floor, I don't know how we're gonna trick folks into thinking that it's a commercial use. If it's an apartment level, set of windows with a small, courtyard that's gated. I don't know that that's substantial enough that it's gonna change the feel of, I see the gated doors and I see that as, that's an apartment complex.
Yeah, it
doesn't-
doesn't look commercial to me either.
Yeah.
I don't feel.
So I don't think, if you had front doors, if you had street access, they were townhome style access right off Main Street, I could see that being potentially confusing, but I don't know that as it's proposed, with entry from other access points, that's be an issue for us.
Alex is on the line, by the way.
Okay, great. Okay. Well, if there's no other board comments, I'm going to have the petitioner come up and address a couple of these, and I'll help remind you of what they are. Okay, if you'll say your name, state your name and how you what you are with the project.
Sure. I'm Kelly Cantor with Landworks Engineering. We're at 958 East Washington, Suite 100 in Indianapolis. I'm the civil engineer. So I will speak on the landscaping and the grading issues on those parking spaces.
Okay,
So the parking spaces on the northwest corner. So those will be more or less at grade to what we have right now. There's not a significant difference between the grade at the property line and the grade at the edge of that edge of those parking spaces. And those are evergreen trees that will be at least 6 foot tall. And then there's shrubbery. So those will block the headlights from going into their property.
How
okay.
will shrubbery break the headlights?
Obviously, we have two neighbors that are concerned about this screening. Well, actually, one about the screening, one will get to the traffic here in a minute. Adam, right now we have, I think, a type 1 buffer. What if we considered doing a type 2 buffer, what does that increase the amount of arborvitae or whatever they're called, like the very dense ones? Would that help buffer that a little bit more?
Well, in terms of the difference between the two buffer yards, there's 3 different types of buffers and they get more and more complex. And it's
Okay.
based on the adjacent land uses and how dissimilar they are. For a type 1, from what I recall, it was just a 10-foot. And you had to have a certain number of trees and a certain number of shrubs. And then for a type 2, I want to say it maybe goes up to 15 or 20. Maybe a little bit higher of a shrub and tree count. And then I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. And then,
That's okay.
and then a type 3, you've got to put in a mound and or a fence as well. So what I would recommend in this case is if there's a way to enhance the vegetation, maybe plant it a little bit more densely, I don't think it'd be something that the developer would have any issues with. I don't have the key available for what those actual plants are. Did you know offhand, Kelly, that
No.
Yeah, I've
the-
got it in my office.
I
It was
mean, the
emailed out, but
circles are like evergreens or something of that. And then the small circles are like shrubs or bushes.
Which are fairly low.
Yes, like I think those are no more than 3 or 4 feet in height at maximum
Okay.
growth, like something.
So it
hedge maybe.
sounds like we're needing height and density.
Yeah, so the shrubs will grow so that they are at or above your standard car headlights. That's what they're intended for, is to block headlights from going onto the property, the neighbor's property. And then the evergreen trees will also do that, but they just add a little bit of a height differential so it looks better.
Okay. Adam, what, I mean, I do hear that it sounds like it might need to be beefed up a bit. And also especially as these plants are maturing and growing, it's going to take a little bit of time to fill in and heighten.
well, I understand the neighbors' concerns.
Yeah.
I would say that we could do, again, if the developer is amenable to it, is a dense planting of evergreen trees on that north area
Okay, we can do
to
that.
form a screen, whether that's arborvitae, whether it's Norway spruce. I think that over time, wouldn't have to worry about maintenance from a fence, which
Right.
can be a pain.
Again,
But
I've
the point of having some dense evergreens in that area to form a continuous row, I think is a good idea.
okay. And that's something you can work with the developer to enhance the density of the screening.
Yeah, I think if you put it, Probably be best if you put it as a condition.
Okay,
The basic, that the intent would be to form an evergreen screen
And would that,
along the north end
okay, for the type
of where the parking
faces. Yeah.
spaces face residential.
Yeah, it looks like. Yeah, it looks like both the north side, the south side doesn't have any parking facing.
Yeah,
That's correct.
so-
There's only parking facing the north side.
so both of those, what, 6 foot or 6 space
Yeah, that-
places, one on the north, one on the west and one on the east?
Yeah, there's like, yeah, 2 5 stall or 1 5 stall, 1 4 stall.
Okay. All right. Let me see, let me go back to my notes here. I do have one question. Where were the dumpsters located? I'm just curious. I know they have to be enclosed and screened and all that.
Yeah, so the first one's on the northwest or northeast corner there.
Oh,
Yep,
that's
right
what those
there.
are. Okay,
And then the other one is on the southwest corner of the site. Yep. Down
Okay.
there on the, yep.
all right. Let me look at my notes here to see, make sure I'm getting. We've got the retaining screen wall, that's traffic, commercial look.
Here's
We've
Tom's.
got where the pond is located. Okay. Next question we had, and I'm not sure if it's something that we even addressed tonight, and that's the traffic that was brought up by the neighbor as far as stop signs and all that. Will that come at a later date for review, or is that something that is an automatic that's within the PUD?
Well, we would review it as part of the final plans, but my understanding is, just in full transparency, is that there are no plans to have any four-way stops or anything like that on this stretch. I think the only stop signs that you would see, if at all, would be coming out of the parking lots onto Main.
Okay, so then Main Street, it's being connected from the neighborhood to the north and that's going to be one thoroughfare with no stops on it.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Until they get to
So they get to Carolina
Carolina
or Michigan.
or Michigan.
going
Okay.
southward. Yep.
Is that, okay, well, okay. Is that something that is an internal thing, Adam, or does that come back around to us? And is that addressed like in a traffic study or?
It's something that is at the discretion of the town. And it's based on, I would say best practices in terms of traffic, flow and design.
Okay.
And so I don't believe that, stop signs, a four-way stop would be warranted at either of these places based on the amount of traffic that's coming. So
And so it's not even a decision that this board makes. So if the neighbor still has questions and issues, I would refer him to call your office to discuss.
yes. Yes. And then ultimately, I can't remember if, because we haven't had this come up in a while in terms of new traffic control devices. There may be some town council involvement. Definitely
Is that-
town manager. It would be town manager and possibly town council.
Okay. Does
make that
that answer
decision.
where to go to next?
Just a quick comment. I mean, so we've done work to calm traffic on the property, and that's why the curbs at the top and
Mhm.
bottom come in just like they do on Main Street, like you guys have now, right? And the purpose is to slow traffic. But stop signs don't to me, stop signs wouldn't be appropriate because I've never seen a stop sign where you don't have streets crossing. There's no streets crossing on the project. It's just parking lot and then one.
Till you get to
main-
Carolina or
Right.
to, yeah, okay. All right.
I think we sell it.
Star.
Are crosswalk signs required at the crosswalks? By our work standards or requirements?
Yes.
So that probably will help as well.
I would agree. Yeah, the signage for crosswalks. Okay, I've got one other follow-up question here, I think that was asked by Brittany, and this is 40 units total per building. And that would also, if there's an amenity or whatever, it would eat into that 40 units?
Get more single source real estate services, a project manager, development manager on the project. So it is 40 units per building, and there is a small amenity center in each of the buildings. So there's one that's going to be fitness, and then another community room in the other building.
Okay, so it'll be 40 units plus
Plus the
the
amenities.
amenities.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Does that answer
Plus
your
one
question?
amenity
Brittany?
area in each building. Yep.
All right. Let me see, where am I now on my list?
I have one follow-up question, and this will
Okay.
be for Adam. So if you recommended making the shrubbery to the north to protect Mr. Lambert's property as a condition, when would we see evidence of that condition between now and the final approval? Or like, where's that gonna show?
So, if you were to make a condition on that tonight and on the lighting, that was suggested, is I would review that when I review the final plans along with the other agencies. I always check to see if there were any plan commission stipulations that were put onto the project. And that's one thing that, we'd have to make sure is reflected on the final plan.
Okay, and I'm gonna ask one question that I know Ms. Davis is gonna come at me for later. If we set a condition, can the town council override it?
No, not if you are the body that is the final stop for approving a particular, aspect of the project, then no. So for instance, in this case, the council does not review the site plans at this level. So if you were to add, a condition that is a reasonable nexus between the type of approval that they're seeking and the subject at hand, then no, they cannot override that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So if they have separate amenity centers that are attached to the building, why is it that we are having to discuss commercial storefront on the apartment buildings instead of that being on the amenity centers that are attached to the buildings?
Well, the amenity centers are integral to the buildings. So it's not a separate, unit.
Side building. So. So the community room, you can see that outdoor, like an outdoor area. The community room's right there where his cursor is inside the building.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, and then, it wasn't brought up. Sorry, Amanda.
It's okay.
As I pointed out, most of the residents that surround this area are more of a classical traditional nature. Was any thought given to that when you guys were designing the look of this building? Because I feel like the black and the white are I mean, it's flashy. It's gonna stand out. It's gonna be very look at me. And sorry. Because we have a lot of single story, very small 2-story houses all in this area that are very conservative. And I understand growth. I understand progress. I mean, my job is always changing, constantly changing. But I'm just wondering, is there anything that can be a little bit more empathetic to the community?
So you went through considerable amount of iterations, I guess I would say, with staff and through council and through when we went through the rezoning and all of that earlier this year. And talked through that quite a bit. On the ends of each building, we actually made them 2 stories instead of 3 stories with a pitched roof to more fit in with those, the single family that are on either side of that. And then in the middle, rather than do a pitched roof and make this a much taller building, we went with a flat roof in the middle. And then, you know, just trying to break up that facade, but also give a nod on the ends of the building to the residential. So there was a lot of thought that went into this. That was several months ago, and we went through lots of iterations, you know, again, through this commission and through council and with staff to get to where we are. So.
I see that in the thing. Have other 3-story apartment buildings that are just a little bit blend in a little bit. As well. And it's a great design. I think that the fact that it does blend in with the 2 stories on either side and the flat top roof. I think you guys did a great job with that. I like the coloring on either end. But just the bright white with the black all around. I think it is a lot.
So I've got a follow-up on that. So the textures and the materials that will be on this, they're going to look very similar to this elevation. I mean, like, do you have paint colors and all that that's already determined? Or is it?
We're at about 50% CD, so I don't know that we've necessarily.
Okay, so it may
100%
not be all black and
out
white. You're
there.
gonna have stone color, you'll
Sure,
have brick
sure.
color, you'll have paint color.
Yeah, and Melissa Garrison, actually with Current Architecture, she's on Zoom. She's our architect, so she may be better able to answer the questions than I am, but. Yeah, I understand.
I told
Yeah.
you know, the ends of the building seem very sympathetic towards the, you'll see a lot of blues, a lot of cream. In the neighborhood around a lot of brick. I understand you can't do a solid brick building. That would be an enormous expense because
Sure.
brick facade in today's time. But just the sticking with more neutral colors just seems to be more sympathetic to the neighborhood and the surrounding area. And you have churches, you have parks, you have historic buildings.
All right. Well, I'm going to end on one note here, and this is, I don't think we've talked about this, and this is that the lighting. Do you all have a problem with taking it from, I think the proposed, was it 22 down to the 20?
No, that's
Okay,
fine.
because that would need to be into a condition
That's
when we get to
absolutely
that.
fine. No.
Okay.
I have a
All right.
question then, just to follow up on what Brittany was saying. Will there at any point in time be a design that we see between now and finality that would show what the color scheme is going to be so that we know exactly what we're going to see when this is all said and done? That
So-
we,
Yeah, this is, I mean,
So
these are
this
the
is-
colors, yeah.
okay, because we were talking about bricks and stuff like, or other colors, like she was just saying there. It
Mhm.
makes it sound like there could be a discrepancy. So I know if this is what I see, this is what I'm going to get. That's okay.
No, these are just me running my mouth, being loud, trying to plead. Ask for a little more sympathy. When they are doing, because we're at like what, 50% design right now?
That's where,
Yeah.
that's where we're at,
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I think unless we have any more questions, I'm going to let you guys have a seat.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
and let's see where we are on all this. All right, it looks like, Adam, should we do this in two chunks? One for the 4 minor plat subdivision, and then a motion for the site plan, landscape plan, building
Yeah,
elevation.
I do one motion for each case. Meaning, case
the-
number 06 STP 2022.
All right, so I am going to be looking for a motion from a board member to either approve with conditions, or deny the site plan, landscape plan, building elevations, and lighting.
West side plan, that the outdoor lighting, you know, and that the entire northern property line have additional vegetation, green, evergreen.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, that looks like that one passed. Let's go then to the second one, which is the 4-lot minor subdivision. So I'm looking for a motion to approve with conditions, which I don't think we had discussed any, or deny the minor subdivision.
I'll
make-
make a motion to approve case number 06 STP 2022, Ridgeview West minor subdivision.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion passes. All right, switching gears. Thank you all for that one. The next one, and the last one is the zoning ordinance amendments. This is a request by town council for the commission to hold a public hearing and make recommendation on the package of amendments to this ordinance. Now, there was a subcommittee formed of some plan commission members and some town council members that reviewed our existing ordinance, and there were some edits made. We don't necessarily have a presentation per se on this, but Adam, if you could just hit maybe some of the highlights. I think this has been posted and also sent out to the board members. So if you can just kind of hit maybe some of the highlights that are the most important.
Sure. Let me just share this on Zoom here. All right, so just to give you some brief background, the zoning ordinance that we use today went into effect in January 2020 when the town took over planning and zoning from Hancock County. And we basically took the existing Hancock County zoning ordinance, made a few tweaks to it, but it was predominantly based on what the county did. We adopted that, council adopted that, and then the other document that was folded into that was the old Broadway Main design standards that we had previously. So those two documents got put together to form our ordinance. And I can say that from a staff perspective over the last really coming up on 3 years here, it's worked rather well overall. But like anything, you tend to notice that certain problems come up. And in dealing with comments that both the town council and staff have received from the residents about different aspects of the code, we didn't do a full overhaul. It was basically take a few different sections that needed to be fixed and make changes to them. So the one thing that I wanted to bring out for the public's benefit, I'd say the one area where we made some changes had to do with accessory structures, specifically pole barns. Previously, the regulations were spread out in a few different portions of the code, and the regulations, frankly, were not very robust in dealing with metal buildings, pole barns, and residential areas. So we look to enhance those. And so simply put, anything that you're seeing in the document that is highlighted in yellow means something that was changed, either amended or deleted. In this case, as it pertains to metal buildings, based on my input, the committee's input, said that pole barns and metal buildings shall only be allowed in agricultural, rural residential, institutional, industrial business park, industrial light, and industrial general. That was probably, out of all the different minor changes throughout, that's the one that really sticks out as being noteworthy. We also said that the size of those buildings shall be no larger than 50% of the area of the primary structure. And that all of these accessory structures shall be placed a minimum of 15 feet behind the front plane of the primary structure. So a lot of it dealt with responding to complaints and concerns that we've heard from the community. The other thing that we deleted from the ordinance was the issue of public art. There was a section in the Broadway Main Design Standards that dealt with regulation of public art, and I think there was widespread acknowledgement that this is something that didn't need to be regulated in this way. So if it didn't need to be regulated in this way, why have regulations on it? So I said in our previous meeting with the study committee is, contrary to popular belief, I actually do believe that if we don't need to regulate something, it shouldn't be regulated. I know that kind of stands might run counter to what people think, but so it's good to know that we did delete a whole section that was not used, that's not necessary, and unnecessary regulations. So with that, if you have any specific questions on any particular text that you may have noticed, if you had hopefully a chance to look at it, I'd be more than happy to address that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, well, we're going to open up to public response, which doesn't look like we have any public left. So this will go pretty quick. Next is government official. Have anything to say on this? The shaking of the head is no. Does the board have any questions for Adam over any of these changes that they saw?
Oh, I want to mention one other thing.
Okay.
At the study committee, Cheyenne had mentioned a bunch of different plants that
Yeah, I
she's
saw
very
that.
knowledgeable as to what was invasive species. And our list was out of date and did need to be updated. So that was really the other, I'd say that the top three things that
Okay.
we dealt with: getting rid of public art, dealing with accessory structures / pole barns. And the third one was updating the plant list for the town. So
All right. All
appreciative of that expertise.
right. All good amendments. All right. Yes, Jason.
Just procedural, there's not going to be any problem with those of us who are on the study committee voting to approve this.
No, not at all.
Okay. All right. Well,
No,
I
the
think-
point of the study committee was to have a group that was comprised of a few of you all and a few of the council members to dig into it a little bit more deeply than maybe each board would want to do. But certainly no issue there.
Okay. Well, I think we're down to looking for a board member that's willing to make a motion to approve or deny the zoning ordinance amendments.
I will, go ahead. I'll make a recommendation to approve and adopt all amendments proposed to the Fortville zoning ordinance.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor?
I
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, looks like that passed.
Yippee.
Well, do we have any additional board comments on anything?
This does say December 19th. of 2022.
Okay, so on our paperwork, Adam, Brittany brought up that it was introduced and filed on December 19th. Is that going to be a,
That's true,
Okay.
actually. Yeah, so the ordinance went to
okay,
town council for a first reading. Similar, it's the exact same way that we process rezonings where we'll take it to council for their initial input and also hold first reading. Then it comes to plan commission for your recommendation and back to them for a final decision.
okay. Then is there anything for the board or anybody to sign on this document? Or we just recommend
Yeah, I
approval?
think it's the town council.
Yeah, I may have you, there is a section in the ordinance itself, the way it's formatted, that has a spot for your signatures, and I think we'll have you do that, if it passes
Okay,
at the next
all right.
meeting. I also wanted to mention very quickly. Yeah.
Hey, Adam, this is Alex. Can
Yes.
you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Alex.
I think to Amanda's question on the next steps, so having the commission sign the ordinance is perfectly fine, but they certify it, right? Just like a rezone, they would certify that this is the plan commission's recommendation to make these changes to the zoning ordinance. That goes back to the council, and then the council accepts that or rejects that recommendation. I think that's the technical
the next step.
process.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you, Alex.
Yep.
Brittany, was that answered your question, Brittany? Okay, all right.
And then the last thing that I wanted to bring up quickly is now that we're starting to finish the zoning ordinance update, the other item that the town council wanted us to take a look at was the comprehensive plan. And so probably beginning in January, we'd like to do a similar format of having a study committee. I know the council liked that format and probably have the same members unless you wanted to do something different. And really the focus, my opinion, would be on the comprehensive plan. The focus would be on the map. The map is woefully out of date. A lot of the different policies, I think, are still very good. We can certainly revisit those, but the map was from 2014.
Oh, wow.
And frankly, I think at that time, the decision makers at that time wanted to limit a lot of the growth outside of Fortville, and it's very different with how the town has grown. So it's definitely time to look at that map, especially, and it might be I think it's a neat opportunity for the town, because since we have a fairly small geographic area that we're taking a look at, my hope is that we can craft a little bit clearer of a vision as to what types of land uses you'd like to see in different areas. So for example, when we talk about single family residential, there's quite a big range. Are we talking kind of newer suburban densities? Are we talking very large lot? Are we talking neo-traditional development? And I think we can get into some of those details in terms of having a mix, especially on the housing side, of different styles that would result in different price points for different folks in the community. So it might be a little bit different from what other communities do that might be a lot larger, that can't get into that level of detail, but I think we can, since we're smaller. So something to be on the lookout for. The other thing that we may take a look at early next year are impact fees. What we want to do with that. It's been on the back burner for a while. There's quite a process to go through if the council wants to embark on that process, but there, like anything, there's pros and cons to implementing impact fees. So I think in the first part of next year, we'll evaluate those pros and cons as well. And then I guess lastly, probably not surprisingly, our single family residential permit activity is down quite a bit from where it was this time last year. It's probably down about 40% or so, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It is what it is. Some of it has to do with different projects that are coming online, or not online. They may be lagging behind. But what I can tell you is I think consistent with what the other communities in Hancock County are experiencing, because of interest rates going up, high prices, that the demand has softened. But just wanted to give you a heads up on that. We'll probably give you the year-end report in January as well. I think we've given it to the Plan Commission in the past, just showing you what some of the numbers are in terms of development activity. So we're still busy, but it's definitely single family permits have cooled off.
And mentioning that, since we do approve all development, and right now is not a great time to bring it up, so I'll bring it up again in the spring, but Northwest Fortville, and there's another development, I think it's self-storage on 96, right when you come into town, and they've got like huge, big, bare stockpile, no seating or anything. Like, those are the entrances to our community, and they just are like pile of dirt right now. And I know they will be built, but as things slow down, how long will Northwest Fortville be a mountain of dirt, So something obviously to touch in the spring, because they can't really do anything about it right now.
Well, I can tell you that for Northwest Fortville, they are actively looking at the next phase of Section 2. And the Ryan Homes product has been selling a little bit better than the David Weekley product. So there are a lot of Ryan style lots in the upcoming section. So the bottom line is my hope that that mound will go away here soon. But your point is well taken, especially with the project on 96th Street, 1000 North. That one having languished is if in the spring, if it's still looking not aesthetically pleasing, we can certainly use the code enforcement mechanism to obtain compliance to ensure that these areas are cleaned up, if need be, especially if they're going to take longer than expected to build out. So it is something, I'm glad you raised it. It's something we should keep an eye out for.
Zach. And I'll speak into that. If you remember, I think it was when the storage facility on 96th Street presented their site plan, Scott had kind of asked them about some of that aesthetic. And, I think the owner kind of gave us that gentleman's agreement, but that's something I've been paying attention to as well, because as we move on to the next phase of that, as we move on to other things, because I still see those dead trees that haven't been replaced. I still see stuff like that. So I'll be right there with you when that comes around.
They've got state requirements to be seated too, so.
Right. For their SWIP.
All right, does anybody else have any comments, questions? All right, well, I want to thank everybody for a wonderful, successful year. And
Motion to adjourn.
wait, yes, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Thank you all.
You want